In this episode, I speak with Chalé. Chalé always had the deep intuition and knowing that she would be a mother who birthed her babies at home. She tells me of her first pretty straightforward pregnancy where she birthed at home with medical midwives. And then she goes on to describe her decision to release her second pregnancy shortly after her first baby was born. Upon becoming pregnant again, Chalé's partner suggested to just birth the baby themselves, and that opened up the territory of birthing her next children with only family present. Even after a brief separation from her partner, Chalé still made the choice to birth one of her babies at home, and this time, no one was even present to witness that experience. Chalé describes how she had very uneventful and uncomplicated pregnancies and trusted herself throughout her swift birth experiences to bring her babies earthside in such gentle and easeful ways. Sit back and enjoy Chalé's stories of her incredibly normal and easeful home birth experiences that she always knew she'd have. Hello, Chalé. Thank you so
Hi,
much, and welcome to the Free Birthing in Color podcast. Um,
thank you.
yeah, I'm so grateful to have you, as I said before. And I feel like we should just get into it because I'm so excited to hear your story and to hear your
Okay.
words now. So the first question I want to ask you is, what is your lineage and what is your ancestry that you're passing on to your children?
Yeah. Ooh, wow. First, again, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I'm so excited to connect with you, on this podcast and sharing these stories. I really, truly believe they are the medicine that we need. So I'm happy to share, what little that I have to offer to the collective.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I come from a very mixed kind of background or lineage.
Mhm.
My father is of African American descent, so we come from the diaspora, right from the South, from enslaved Africans, as well as some European ancestry and Native American as well, all on
Mm.
my father's side. I also know specifically that we do have ancestry from Madagascar.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's something special, that to know, to actually be able to know where part of, your family comes from in Africa. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, right, Black people from the diaspora can relate to that, right?
Mhm.
Knowing exactly, right, like where your lineage started or came from is not all of us get to know that. So it is something very special.
Mhm.
And then on my mother's side, I'm Irish, French, and Swedish.
Wow.
Um, and as well as Anishinaabe. Our family comes from those northern lands, far up north. My mom grew up in a tiny town in Michigan, up in the up by the Great Lakes. So yeah,
Wow, that's beautiful. That's so amazing that you know so much about your mother and your father's side as well. So thank you
yeah.
for sharing that. So
Yeah,
cool.
definitely. So it's like I said, not everybody, even has the privilege to
Mhm.
know all of that about their families.
Mhm.
And I know for parts of my family on both sides, like
Mhm.
that those things had to be uncovered,
Mhm.
right? Like they were secrets, right? Like on my mom's side, being Native American was a secret. It wasn't right. Like they didn't want people to know.
Mhm.
And so her and her father being proud of that lineage was frowned upon, right? Like that was kind of new.
Mhm.
So but so that's been interesting for me to try to reconnect to as well. Because I'd like to acknowledge that I was born and raised in Hawaii on Kanaka land. So that's, I'm not Hawaiian, right? Like I'm not Kanaka. But I do understand and have a relationship with like relating to the land, right?
Mhm.
As Indigenous people in a
Mhm.
cultural sense.
Mhm.
Um, I just haven't been able to practice it with my own ancestral people, right? Or on those lands, that
Right.
that sort of thing. but my children are Hawaiian and Filipino, and so being able to pull all of it together, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And instill those values anyway. I believe all indigenous cultures kind of hold the same core values, right? And beliefs of respect and love and truth, like dignity,
absolutely.
honor. So, I like no matter what, like that, that's something that we're trying to pass on to our kids. So,
Mhm. Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow, that's so beautiful. I love hearing that. And speaking to your kids, let's move into your birth stories and yeah, just start, I guess, with wherever your motherhood journey began for you.
yeah. Gosh, so my my oldest is actually turning 7 this weekend. So it's kind of poignant, that like returning back
Mhm,
to my first birth
mhm,
in a 7-year cycle, right?
mhm,
Yeah, so he's turning 7 and I had always known that I was going to give birth at home.
mhm.
I really can't explain it. That's just something I always knew from the time I was a little girl. I knew I was going to be a mother and I knew I would have my babies at home. Um, and I remember growing up, people not really understanding that.
Mhm,
I think, like that whole girl boss culture, right? Like girls can do anything. You don't have to, right? Like just be a mom.
mhm.
And
I'm just gonna pause the recording if you can hear me. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I remember feeling like I couldn't relate to a lot of my peers in that sense. Like, of course, I had aspirations, right, of who I wanted to be and things that I wanted to do, but I always knew that I would have kids. I don't know, like I really don't know how to explain it.
Mhm,
Um, that I just knew that. And so I found myself pregnant after like a kind of whirlwind relationship.
mhm,
We had been together for about 3 months at that point, and found out I was pregnant, and we decided to do it. We were like, okay, let's do it, right? I was gonna keep the baby, and he said, well, I'll if that's what you want to do, then okay, I'm with you.
mhm,
Um, yeah. So,
mhm.
um, and it just kind of started from there. I remember him being a little, kind of balking a little when I told him that it was, I was going to be birthing at home. Like I wasn't asking. I wasn't like, oh, maybe like, are you okay with like, no, it was,
Mhm.
I'm going to have our baby at home. Um, how are you going to help me achieve that? Right? That was my
Yeah,
question.
nice.
Um, yeah. Because like I said, I always knew that. And I remember in college seeing the business of being born, and
Mhm,
that just solidified everything. I was like, oh, there's facts to
mhm,
back up this thing I always knew I would do. Perfect. Like,
mhm. Yeah,
um, I was like, cool. And I remember telling everybody, I was like, go watch that movie. I was like, even if you're not having a baby, go watch this documentary.
yeah, totally.
Because everybody has been born, and I
Mhm.
think everybody deserves to know how they were born and how they came into this world, because it does deeply and profoundly affect you for the rest of your life,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Um,
You're a little bit frozen again.
oh, am I back?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see your picture. Oh, there we go. We're back.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah. So I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No worries, no worries.
Um, gosh, where were we? I'm so
You're
sorry.
just talking about, speaking to your partner about, "We're having a home birth. How are you gonna support me in this?" And with that first babe of yours.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, so so we started, I remember, having like the initial OB appointment to confirm the pregnancy, and um
There we are. You're back.
Okay.
So,
No, it's okay. I remember being really surprised at like how how uncomfortable the ultrasound was, right? I was like, nobody had ever like told me that ultrasounds are not fun.
Mhm.
I don't like them at all.
Okay,
So,
fair. Yeah.
but like they really have to, I mean, you think about it, like they're trying to get a picture of your insides. So
Mhm.
they kind of have to apply some pressure. Like I understand, but nobody really talked about that. Um, so I was surprised. Um, and I remember, I was a first time mom, really excited about my pregnancy. And at my initial like just like confirmation visit, right, they'd given me this book, right, like kind of a little what to expect when you're expecting
Mhm.
knockoff, right, like from my doctor's office.
Mhm.
And I remember like being really excited to go home and maybe and like have this new information, to absorb about my pregnancy. And I opened it, right, and looked at it, and there was literally like a just a page for each month of, oh, your baby's this size and this might happen. And like it was
Mhm.
a very basic, like generic overview. And I was like, what? I was like, what am I supposed? I was like, I already knew all of this. Like,
Mhm.
I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? I was like, this isn't helpful at all. Um, and so I had like another follow-up visit the next month, and I was like, and I didn't know how to find a midwife, like I didn't know who to ask. Like at the time, Googling it didn't really give me answers.
Right.
So, yeah. So I was like, let me ask, let me ask at my next appointment, right? Like I was,
Yeah.
not knowing at the time in my naivete, like now I'm kind of like, oh my God, like what? But um excuse me, but yeah, so I went up to my next appointment and I asked my nurse. I was like, hey, any midwives? Like, I was like, I really want to have a home birth.
Mhm.
Um and she was like, she kind of like looked at me, right, and looked at the door, and she she got up and like made sure nobody was like in the hallway and closed the
Oh.
door.
Mhm.
Yeah. And she sat back down and she was like, okay, so she was like, so I'm from Washington and I have had home births.
Mhm.
She was like, it's different here in Hawaii. She was like, but I did have a home birth here.
Mhm.
Um, she was like, don't tell anybody I told you this, but you can, go to so and so.
Right.
And she's a midwife that I know of if
Mhm.
if you're interested, kind
Mhm.
of thing. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. Like I was like, what's her name?
Yeah.
Um, so I frantically Googled this woman's name, and she popped up, thankfully,
Mhm.
and set up an appointment. And, it was a wonderful hour-long consultation, and my partner and I left and we're just like, yeah, like yes, this is the woman who's gonna help us bring our baby into the world.
So this
Um,
woman, was she a lay midwife? Is that why the nurse was being so secretive? Or is she
Well, so at the
registered, but it's just
time,
midwifery was
midwifery was not regulated in
oh,
Hawaii.
okay. Okay.
So didn't really matter. She was a naturopathic doctor,
Mm,
and offered midwifery services.
okay.
And there are lots of other midwives as well.
Mhm.
But I think my nurse was more hush about it just because we were in a doctor's office. And
Okay.
for them, it's a liability, right? Like for
Right.
them
Yeah.
to even know you're planning a home birth is
Mm,
a liability for
okay.
them. As I would find out in my second pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up having dual care for that
Mhm.
pregnancy. I would go to my OB appointments and I would go see my midwife every
Mhm.
month. And the difference was stark.
Yeah.
It was so interesting to see, like in real time in my own experience. I ended up firing my first OB,
Nice.
because she insisted that I had to be tested for gestational diabetes, right, with that drink. And I
Oh,
was like, no, I was like, okay, listen, if you want to test me for gestational diabetes, there's these other ways that I'm okay with us you figuring out that I don't have gestational diabetes. But okay.
Mm.
Um, because I asked her, I was like, why? I was like, why are you so concerned that I might have gestational diabetes? I was like, I'm not concerned. I was like, I feel fine, you know? I was like, I'm not having any symptoms of diabetes. So
Right.
I was like, what are your, you know, like I was like, you're my doctor. Maybe you're seeing something I'm not, you know,
Hmm.
like based on my chart. I don't know.
Hmm.
And I asked her, and all she could give me was my weight,
Oh,
right?
gosh, yeah.
Because and I gained a good like 40, 50 pounds very quickly in my pregnancy. And I would find out that's just my norm.
Yeah.
I gain all of it in like the first, second, you know, early part of the second trimester.
Hmm.
And I just stay, and then I stay at that weight and my belly just gets bigger. I don't, it's,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, so I don't know. That's just how my body works.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not a small woman either. Like I started off in pregnancy 175, 180.
Hmm.
So me being 200 pounds and pregnant, you know, like I was like, I don't think that's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
You just have a different body type.
yeah,
You
but she
handle
was
pregnancy.
very concerned.
Mm.
Um, she was very concerned about my weight.
Mm.
And I was like, that's, I was like, if that's your only reason and you're like trying to force me to do this disgusting test, no, thank you.
Hmm.
I was like, I'll just see. So I, you know, I just called my clinic and was like, can I just schedule my next appointment with a different OB? Um,
Nice.
and I ended up having a male OB. He was my mom's OB with all of us. So he, I, not me, but my siblings actually. I
Okay.
was the only one who was born at a different hospital.
Mm.
But he helped, you know, he was there. He was my mom's OB for all of my siblings. So
Mhm.
I remember him. And it was a little interesting, you know, having him be my OB, but he kind of just let me do what I wanted. I think because he had that like prior relationship with my mom as well, like they still, you know, knew each other kind of thing. So, you know, like he knew I was having a home birth and I was just kind of like there for the, you know, just like
Mhm.
because that's what's expected of us. I don't, you know, like
Mhm.
looking back, I'm
Yeah.
like, why did I still go? It, like I had a midwife at that
Mhm.
point. Um, but anyway, so yeah, so you know, we did that and it was wonderful and amazing and everything was uncomplicated. And you know, we got to my 39th week and I wasn't working anymore and I remember going to bed and feeling like achy. And then the contractions started, and I, in my naivete again, and just being excited, started counting, you know, like timing them, right? Like I had the little app on my phone, and um, so I stayed up all night timing my contractions instead of sleeping. And I remember my partner getting up very early. He had to get up really early, you know, for work at the time. And I was like, hey, don't go to work today. I was like, I think today's the day, right? I was like, I've been having contractions all night, blah, blah, blah. Um, he was like, okay. He was like, well, let's just go get breakfast. You know, he was like, it'll be our last, you know, like breakfast together. So let's go do that. So we did that. Um, and then we went for a walk after breakfast, and that really got things going. So I was like, please take me home. Um, so, so we went home, and I remember falling asleep in between contractions. You know, because I was so tired. I'd stayed up all night timing my contractions. And so I ended up laboring for 26 hours total. Yeah, and he was born on March 26th. Um,
Oh,
at 2:22 a.m. So
oh, wonderful.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, both of my two older boys, he was born at 2:22 and
Mm.
then my second son was born at 1:11 a.m.
No
So
way.
both yeah, both on Saturday mornings.
Wow.
So yeah. Yeah, I was like, that's so funny. But yeah, so he was we had a water birth for him. I remember us excitingly getting all the stuff for the tub. My
Mhm.
partner, one of his sisters had bought us the birth tub, you know, as a present. So that was amazing. And we just got all the gear we needed, right? To get it set up. So my partner did all of that and we got in the tub and labored and um yeah, I remember us falling asleep in the tub at one point, probably transition, right? Um, because I finally got in the tub and was able to like, my body was able to actually relax. And me and my partner, I feel like we're finally able to just relax and connect, right, at that point. Um, and then because I remember my nose like touching the water. I had like fallen forward and he was like slumped back to sleep too. Um, and so it startled me, and I woke up, and at the same time like a contraction started, and I remember crowning, and then I kind of leaned forward and the rest of him came out and his dad caught him, and
Oh.
um yeah, it was he just kind of he said he just kind of held him under the water for a little
Mhm.
bit after he came out. I was catching my breath, right?
Mhm.
Kind of
Yeah.
recovering. Um, and he said as soon as I like caught my breath and he had brought him up and I heard him cry, he said
Mhm.
I just turned around and like snatched him up. And I was like, oh, I was like, that's not how I remember it. I'm so like, I'm so sorry. Yeah, he was like, he heard the baby and you just were like, oh,
Mhm.
there he is, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
yeah. So yeah, and I remember all of my umbilical cords are very short. I
Mhm.
don't know. I just I just make them short, I guess. I don't know.
Mhm.
So I wasn't able to like fully bring him up to my chest, right? Like he was just like on my stomach and he
Mhm.
couldn't go any further, right? And I was in the tub.
Mhm.
Um so my midwife, we had been sitting with him for I'd say a good 15, 20 minutes.
Mhm.
My midwife was there, and I want to okay, I don't even remember her showing up.
Oh, wow.
My doula showed up at like the end that night, right towards the end of my labor. We had let them know, right, hey, labor's starting, like
Mhm.
blah blah blah. So my doula showed up that night, and I have no idea when my midwife appeared, but she came at some point before
Mhm.
2:22 a.m. And the only time I remember her coming up to me is once with her little red headlight
Mhm.
and asking, "Can I listen for heart tones real quick?"
Okay.
And I was like, "Yes, of course. Let's make sure he's okay."
Mhm.
And and I must say, we never found out the gender for any of our babies, but we just knew.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's it. She checked his heart tone one time for the paperwork, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then once I birthed, she came over and was making sure we were both okay, checking,
Mhm.
baby signs, APGAR, all that,
Mhm.
while he was, still on me. And then, she noticed too that I was having trouble like bringing him up. Um, so she was like, hey, she was like, it looks like his placenta has done its job. She was like, I think it's detached and trying to come. Is it okay if we cut the cord, so that we can get him a little higher out of the water and get you to,
Mhm.
she was like, and we can help you get the placenta out, right? I was like, okay, I was okay with that.
Mhm.
But she always asked for consent at every point, and that always put me right as the person in charge of my birth.
Mhm.
And I will forever be grateful to her for for being that person, right, in my very first birth and imprinting that on me as that is my standard, right, for birth.
Yeah.
That unless you are willing to do that and respect my authority in this, then you are not welcome in my space.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, forever grateful to her for that. Yeah. So yeah, so we did that. I had to, cut his cord, and I remember her coaching me through getting my placenta out. I had to like get in a squat and cough a little bit.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and just slowly tugged it out. I remember I felt it, just kind of sitting there. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay. And I was just so tired. My body was just so tired at that point, right? And I think my midwife was also probably worried about that. So she was like, let's get your placenta out, and then get you in bed and assess you kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so came out nice and smooth, and it had a perfect circle in it where my son's head came out. Yeah, like I remember feeling it pop as he crowned. And
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, so it was just this perfect circle.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was really cute. Um, yeah, and we saved his placenta. My doula cut off a little piece and put it in a smoothie for me postpartum, to help with bleeding and cramping.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, hey, it worked for me. It was a delicious banana smoothie. It was very refreshing. I loved it. Um, yeah, so it was a very straightforward, simple, amazing, like first birth experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I did struggle postpartum. I had postpartum depression and anxiety from the isolation that comes with being a new mom, and you're the only mom, in a lot of your friend groups. So
Mm-hmm.
nobody's sure how to include you anymore. You're not sure how to include yourself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like where you fit in. Yeah, so that I remember his first year of life being really, really hard.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so that was unexpected.
yeah.
And um, I think I'm still kind of struggling from from that.
Okay.
Um, or like or I guess like feeling the after effects of it in a
Mm-hmm.
way now. Um, yeah, like that was a really hard year.
Yeah,
Um,
I bet.
yeah, and then to find myself suddenly unexpectedly pregnant again,
Mm.
because I was breastfeeding and had erratic periods,
Yes.
so yeah, so unexpectedly found myself pregnant again. And
How
my part
long was the difference between the two babies?
I think he so my first was about 9 months old
Okay,
when
wow.
I got yeah when I got pregnant. And we had talked about that we didn't want to have kids like that close in age, right? We wanted to wait at least 2 years kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. And so when I found myself pregnant, I didn't tell my partner. And I I didn't tell him at first. I
Mm-hmm.
eventually did, but I just told him, I was like, um, but obviously we can't keep it, right? Um, and at the time he didn't know how else to respond except to support me, right? Like he didn't want to counter me, like he didn't want to
Yeah.
oppose me in any way, or seem like he
Mm-hmm.
was against me, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
though that wasn't what he wanted
Right.
either. And
Okay.
I only wanted it because I thought that's what he wanted, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we had previously talked about not wanting kids that close in age.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like these 9 months have been the hardest of my entire life. What the fuck am I gonna do with two kids, right? Like, I was terrified,
Mm-hmm.
I was just terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up having an abortion. Our son was, like 10 and a half months old, um, and that day changed a lot of things, in our relationship. It
Mm-hmm.
was really hard. I got even more depressed. At the time I was seeing an OB, right? And they were just like birth control, right? They just
Mm.
threw the
Yeah.
birth control at me, and I think I took it for like 10 days and was like, fuck this. It was awful. Like those were t terrible 10 days. It just made my depression even worse,
Yeah.
honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Excuse me. So, yeah, so got off of that, um, discovered FAM, the fertility awareness method, a little bit. Started just like looking into that. Um, and then found myself pregnant again,
Yeah.
despite my best efforts. And um, and somehow just being like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay. I think we were at a better point in our relationship. Like things were kind of looking up in a lot of different ways. And so I remember, telling him that I was pregnant, and we went out to get lunch to celebrate. And he just kind of looked at me and was like, "You want to like just do this one ourselves?" And I was
Oh,
like,
it was his
"What?" And he was like,
idea.
"Yeah, like, yeah." Yeah, a lot of people are surprised by that, but yeah, he just kind of he looked at me, he was like, I think we can do it ourselves. Like he was like the last one was he was like they were there, right? He was like they were there, but like what he was like you did that. So I was like, okay. Um I was like, okay. I was like, okay. Um and the idea had been planted in us from our doula, right? Her and her partner, free birth. So
Okay.
they had mentioned, right? They did our we did our childbirth education class with her and her partner. They teach it together, so that was really cool.
Oh, neat.
We took it with another couple that was expecting around the same time as us. Yeah, so that was a really, like amazing experience as well. Um, yeah, so like we knew them and they did it, so he was kind of like, like why not? He was like, "No, you're healthy,
Hmm.
like nothing went wrong. There wasn't anything that we did necessarily need help with."
Hmm.
um Other than like the technical stuff. It was nice that they took down the birth pool. Like I remember waking up, like they gave me the baby and I nursed him and we fell asleep, and I remember waking up and it was like nothing had ever happened. I was like,
Yeah.
whoa. I was like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
um so besides that, right, he was just like, he was like, if you want, he was like, if you want a midwife again, like, okay. He was like, but if you want to just do it ourselves, then let's do that. And I was like, okay, let's do that.
Cool.
Um, yeah. So we just planned to do that. And I remember that pregnancy being very spiritual, very intuitive, where I had a lot of dreams with her, and I knew exactly who she was,
Hmm.
like from conception. I knew this was our daughter. We knew what we were going to name her.
Oh,
Um, like he had had a name picked out from when I was pregnant with our son. Like he was like,
okay.
no, he was like, this is what I'm naming my daughter. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
No, but of course I was like, of course, it later putting the pieces together, it was like, of course.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah. So we kind of just always knew who we were expecting and just waiting
Hmm.
for her to join us. And people didn't believe me, right? Because we had a boy, so they were like, "Well, what if this one's a girl and you don't have any girl stuff
Hmm.
and you're not finding out? So how are we supposed to get you anything?" And I was like, "It's a
Yeah.
girl." I was like, "If you want to get me girl stuff, then get me girl stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna use the same white onesie that I had with my last baby, but if
Hmm.
you want to get me the girl stuff, then get me the girl stuff. I'm having a girl." And no
Hmm.
one believed me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Um,
crazy how no one does. They need that proof of like, I won't believe
yeah.
you until you get an ultrasound
hmm
that tells you. And it's like, I just know.
It's like I said, I've known every time, and it's
Mhm.
so. I mean, when I talk to other moms, most of the time they tell me the same thing, right? That they did know. So
Mhm.
I'm like, and why wouldn't we? I don't know. Like, why wouldn't we have that knowledge?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah, yeah. So I don't even make it to the 40-week mark. I I have all of my babies before then.
Okay. So,
And
sorry, just to before we get into that. So your
yeah.
pregnancy, because it was a wild pregnancy, technically you
hmm
didn't have any care. How was that for you? Going
So that
through.
pregnancy, yeah. So I knew that I would need like documentation, right, and paperwork in order to get like a birth certificate, right, once I had her, things like
Mhm.
that. So I was like, let me find an OB just for like confirmation and like
Mhm.
whatever checkups, like just paperwork
Yeah.
purposes. And so I made the mistake of letting them know what my plan was. And that,
Okay.
I was like, I'm planning a home birth. I was like, I just need an ultrasound and some paperwork. And dude was like, I am not. You are not going to be my patient if you're planning a home birth. He was like, I'm not taking on that liability. And I was like, I'm not asking you to attend my birth, dude. And he was
Yeah.
like, I don't care. And I was like, okay. So, yeah, so that's how that went.
Okay. Wow.
And he was like, I'll do the ultrasound and that's it.
Hmm.
Um, Never want to see you again, basically.
Right.
So,
Okay. Well,
so I
that's
got my
kind of nice
ultrasound.
though,
I
because that's
mean,
what you
right,
wanted.
I was like, thanks. Right. Yeah, I was like, that's all I needed. So thanks, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got my ultrasound and that was it. And then I didn't have any like medical or standard
Hmm.
like prenatal care. From then on, I just
Hmm.
monitored myself.
Okay.
I did watch what I ate, of course. I made sure I was getting all the proteins and veggies and taking my supplements and getting enough rest. And I was getting more than enough exercise with a 2-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, like it was just taking care of myself the way that I knew how to and
Hmm.
connecting with my baby and enjoying the experience. And I remember enjoying it so much. I really do enjoy pregnancy.
Okay.
I love being pregnant and I just like glowed I don't know, like even people would tell me, they're like,
Hmm.
you're just so bright. And my belly was this huge round. It was like that perfect beach ball,
Hmm.
like pregnant
Yeah.
you think of. And with my
Yeah.
first pregnancy, I didn't have that at all. I remember going on maternity leave for my job and people being like, why are you leaving? I didn't even know you were pregnant. And I was like,
Oh gosh.
yeah,
Mm.
so yeah, and I don't know why it seems like my boys like to just like hide in my hips.
Mm.
So I don't know. Um I don't look very pregnant when I'm pregnant with them. I can hide it very easily, I
Okay.
guess. And with my daughter, it was there was no hiding it.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was different. But yeah, honestly, I just enjoyed it, like I got into belly mapping that pregnancy. So
Mm.
I actually got really good at figuring out her position, and like where she was in my womb. And I remember talking to her and we had like her song picked out. So it's like sing to her,
Oh.
in the womb and that sort of thing. Um, yeah, like it was just a very loving, like wonderful experience. Like just us, right? Like us as a family, just like welcoming this new person, right? Like I said, we
Totally.
just, I don't know, we knew who she was.
Hmm.
We knew who she was going to be.
Yeah.
So we were like, cool, like we're ready. Like we got you.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I remember waking up on a Wednesday morning and I was nannying at the time with my son. I could bring my son with me to go watch this little boy. Um, and and I remember waking up to a contraction. Like a
Okay.
contraction like woke me up out of my sleep and I was like, "Oh, okay. Wow." And I went to the bathroom, right, and sat on the toilet and that got things going. I like had a couple more contractions right on labor station, right,
Hmm.
like they call it.
Yeah.
I went back downstairs and my son had woken up and he was still nursing at the time. So he started nursing and that kicked up the contractions by like 1,000%. And I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I let him nurse as much as I could. And I was like, dude, I can't. Whoa.
Hmm.
They were just like really intense. And he was old enough at that time, right? He just would nurse when he woke up pretty much. And like if he got a boo-boo, right? Like he was already
Yeah.
2. So it was very, if you've ever nursed a toddler, it's it's just kind of like when they need it.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so he nursed and then went off to play. And I continued laboring on our bedroom floor. And he would like come and check in on me, but he did not like the sounds I was making. So he was like, I'm gonna stay very far away from you right now.
Hmm.
And so my partner kept coming to ask me what I needed and like blah blah blah. Like we were supposed to be going to a friend's house, right, for like support and blah blah blah. And I was like, I'm not getting in a car. No
Yeah.
way. I was like, this baby is coming. I remember looking, I was like, look, this baby is coming right now.
Hmm.
So I was like, I'm fine. yes, I'm laboring. I'm not fine, but I'm fine. Um, I was like, I need you to just make sure that our son is okay, right? Like just take care of him, right? Like I was
Mhm.
like, he's like scared and unsure of what's
Mhm.
happening with me. So just take care of him and make like let him know that I'm okay. Like I'm gonna have the baby and the baby will be here and that kind of thing. So he just did that. He was like making our bed, like kind of preparing our space a little more
Mhm.
because our plan had been that weekend to go and get the final things that we needed.
Oh, yeah.
And I woke up on a Wednesday morning in labor, right? So we didn't have diapers or like we didn't have anything. Oh, like I said, that was the plan for that weekend. And she was like,
Yeah.
nope, I'm coming.
She's coming when she's
Um,
ready.
and honestly, if you know her, that's just kind of how she is.
Mhm.
So, yeah, oh my gosh. So he was kind of like freaking out, right? Like, oh, we don't have anything, and are we gonna make it to, like the place where we said we were gonna go, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, no. So
Mm.
I was like, we're going off script completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like, so it ended up being a very free birth, you know,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I think the only thing I had bought was a couple of cloth diapers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was like all we really had for her and like whatever like leftover like Chuck's pads and supplies I had
Mhm.
from my last birth.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, so that's what we were working with and it all worked out.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you really need, just a couple of
And
things,
and
and
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, that's kind of all you really need, honestly.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, so I was in active labor for maybe 3 hours
Wow.
and she was here before 10 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember he had gone and checked on our son and like gotten him a snack or lunch or something. Yeah, just like a snack because it was very early in the morning. So, he'd gotten him settled, and he had come back in the room and was I don't know, he was doing something on our bed and I was like squatting on the floor, like holding onto our bed frame.
Mhm,
Um, and he had literally like just checked. He was like, "Are you good? I'm gonna do this. Like I'm here." I was like, "Yeah,
mhm.
I'm fine, whatever." And and in two pushes, she flew out of me.
Wow.
I barely caught her, but she was
Mhm,
covered in vernix, so she was very sticky.
mhm.
That's the only reason why I caught her. you know. Um, and so I remember, like catching her and sitting down and looking at her and putting her on my chest, and she just
Oh.
like let out this one little cry, and he looked back and he was like, "What?" I was
The
like,
baby's
"She's
here.
here." Yeah, I was
Aw.
like, "She's here." Yeah, it was very fast. She got here really quick, and
Mm.
it was amazing. Though it was a really wonderful experience. Um, I can send you the pictures, or you can see them on my Instagram of the
Yeah.
morning I had her. My
Mhm.
son is nursing on one side and she's on the other. My partner next to me in bed. So,
Aw.
um, yeah, I remember, he went out of the room and at the time we were living with his family,
Okay.
so he was like, she had the baby, and they were like, are you gonna take her to the hospital? And he was like, no.
Mm. Yeah, she's
Um,
good. Yeah.
yeah, they were very concerned.
Mm.
But we were fine. We were perfectly fine. I recovered beautifully. I had a postpartum doula come and bind me
Oh.
at like three or 4 days postpartum.
Mhm.
And then taught me and my partner how to do it. So I still have that same
Mhm.
wrap and
Mhm.
have been using it ever since for all kinds of
Wonderful.
womb things. It's great during my period even. Yeah, so I love it. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna
Yeah.
pass the baby off.
No worries. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. I'm back.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so you know, yeah, that postpartum was like really straightforward and wonderful. I I found a mom who was getting rid of her Tula carrier, and so she just like gifted it to me. She was like, "My kids are grown, have it." I was like, "Oh
Nice.
wow!" I was like, "Thank you so much." It
Yeah.
was this beautiful Tula, and so as soon as I felt okay and ready, I strapped my baby on my back and
Mhm.
we went everywhere, with my
Wow.
little 2-year-old in tow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so and she was a very big baby. She was only 8 pounds at birth, but she was like 20 pounds by the time she was like 10 weeks old. It was crazy. She just
Wow.
like exploded. She was like a
Yeah.
piece of popcorn. Like she like just like she was so chubby, so
Mm.
fat, just like the
Aw.
juiciest little baby.
Oh.
Yeah, so she was just always on my back,
Mhm.
everywhere we went.
Mhm.
And then I think it was a month, like a month after her first birthday, I found myself pregnant again. Um,
Okay.
so with our third baby, and it was not planned, it's very unexpected. I
Mhm.
I had been practicing the fertility awareness method very successfully.
Mhm.
We had been using it to avoid pregnancy for like 6 months
Okay.
at that point. So, you know, um we felt very comfortable. And it was just kind of one of those heat of the moment kind of things. And yeah, ended up pregnant. So, um, and we ended up separating during that pregnancy. Towards the end, I think I was about 7 or 8 months along, and we decided to separate. And that was really hard. Um, in a lot of different ways. Um, but we still, I think, because had such a bond, I guess, and strong foundation with our previous births, right? And, our relationship, that he still honored and respected my wishes, right, and how I was going to birth. And he, let me know that he understood if he didn't want me there, that kind of thing. I did want him there, interestingly enough. Even though I didn't want to be with him, I did want him there for the birth. That
Yeah, that
was,
makes sense.
yeah,
Totally.
it was conflicting
Mhm.
in a way, but I also just had to accept that that was how I felt.
Mhm.
I was like,
Mhm.
I don't understand it either, but hey.
Yeah.
Um, but turns out nobody got to be at that birth.
Oh, okay.
Because yeah, he waited. This little boy waited until nobody was around to show up. I was back living with my mom, and he was living with his family, right, since we had separated. And it was his weekend with the kids. It was towards the end of my pregnancy, but I was just like having on and off prodromal labor. I wasn't sure of, I was like, I could have a baby tonight. It could be next week. I don't know. Like, I was like, I'll keep you as up to date as I can. So yeah, so that weekend he had the kids, and I had another like night of prodromal labor where I just labor into the night, and it would just stop. It would just stop, and I go to sleep and nothing, like no baby. And I was expecting to wake up in labor, right? Like I had with my last baby. That's what I was, I was like, oh, maybe my body's just gonna like do that from now on. But that was not the case. And so I remember I had another one of those nights. It was Friday night, and we had just moved into a new place, my mom and I took a bath and all of that. And, so labor had stopped, and I was finally hungry. So I was like, let me eat a little bit. And then I remember calling the kids and being like, hey, good night. Like, I'm going to go to bed. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And they were like, you didn't have the baby yet, right? And I was like, no, not yet. He'll probably be here soon, not knowing how soon. Um, because it was literally, like I remember, my partner, he was just like, well, um, you let me know, right? He was like, what's going on, or if you need me to come, or if you want me to just bring the kids, or, kind of thing. Um, we said goodnight and hung up. And I, I hung up, and I remember putting on my playlist that I had been listening to of the music that I was feeling called to listen to during this pregnancy. It was very strange. It's not music that I normally listen to or choose or had in a long time. It was an artist that I had been very fond of in high school, but I hadn't listened to him in a very long time. So I was just like, whatever, I don't know, I guess that's what this baby wants to listen to. So I remember putting on the song and, just kind of like coming along a little bit and being about to climb in bed, and a contraction just dropped me to my knees. Um, and like, yeah, and so I like labored down there for a little bit and tried to squat, and it was very uncomfortable and it hurt, and that was new to me. I wouldn't describe labor as painful. It's pain just isn't the right word. Like it's intense, yes, but it's not pain. I don't know, but I was experiencing pain, right, in this instance, and that was new for me. So it kind of freaked me out. And I remember panicking a little bit and having to be like, whoa, 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 like it's okay, Chalé, like it's okay. Like if something is really wrong, like mom, my mom is right there. Um, if something is really wrong, then you can go to a hospital. It's okay, right? Like everything will be okay, right? Like, but for now, like it just hurts a little bit. It's okay. But I remember having to like really talk myself off the like ledge during that point. Like I just like all of these like what ifs just like started popping up in my head. Um, you know, and so I remember, I was making those really loud, low labor tones, and my mom heard me. So she came and checked on me. She's like, "Hey, how you doing? Sounds like there's a baby coming." I was like, "Yeah, I think, I'm pretty sure now things are picking up, and this is it this time, right?" She was like, "Okay." She was like, "I'm gonna go shower, and I'll be right back." And as soon as I heard the shower turn on, I started crowning. I'm not even kidding. It
No
was,
way.
yeah, I was like, I had the same reaction. I was like, no fucking way. Like, what? I was like, what the fuck?
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's kind of the same as my first birth, where I was like leaning back, right, as he crowned, and then I had to lean forward, kind of into a runner's lunge, and the rest of him came out of me. And I remember having to catch my breath again, and I heard him cry, and I turned around and was just like, "Oh, there you are," you know. Because again, we knew who he was. We had his name picked out, you know, from my previous pregnancy, because my partner was like, "Well, that was my girl name. This is my boy name." So, right, because I had gotten to name our first. So
Okay.
I was like,
Okay.
only fair,
Yeah.
and I loved the names as well. So
Hmm.
um, that's they have always been fitting. Like their names are very special and very meaningful
Hmm.
to us and to them, I hope. Like
Yeah,
I hope that that's something that's part of something I can pass on to them, right? Is their names.
totally.
Um, in their lineage. And we gave them because we're not married. So they do have their father's last name. No, but um, but we gave them my last name as one of their middle names, which is like a Filipino Spanish tradition, right? Is to have your
Right.
mother's last name as part of your name, but not the last name, right? Like so.
Right.
Yeah, so we did
Wow.
that.
I love
And
that.
so yeah, so they have a first name, two middle names, my last name, and their dad's last name. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
So yeah, so it's a mouthful for sure. I was like, their initials sound like radio stations. Like, yeah. So, but naming them has always been really fun and special and unique. And I was definitely one of those girls who had like lists of baby names.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Growing up. So it's been, like finally making those dreams come true, I guess,
Yeah.
or see, like seeing, how I've ended up naming my kids has been interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And how was that
yeah.
postpartum
So
experience with
yeah, so that
Chalé?
yeah, so that was interesting, right? Because we were separated, and so there
Mm.
was the whole like custody thing of kids going back and forth, but he completely and has always supported me in extended breastfeeding and and understands the importance of that and baby being with me. So
Mhm.
he would just like come and spend a little bit of time, right? Like when he would pick up or drop off the kids, he would just like kind of spend a couple extra hours, right, to be with
Mhm.
the baby. And it was hard. I know it was hard on him. It was hard on me not having him
Mhm.
there,
Mhm.
um, in that way. It was just different. It was weird.
Yeah.
Um, but we got through it. And once he was a little older, right, and did start eating solids and that sort of thing, then he would go with them. For
Okay.
at first it was, um, you know, for the afternoon and like I'd go pick him up, right? And like he wouldn't
Yeah.
spend the night, right? Like he
Mhm.
would pick all of them up and then I'd go get the baby kind of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
later that day.
Mhm.
So we did that, for a few months until he did start like sleeping overnight, right? I was like, okay, I was like, he's kind of sleeping through the night. So
Mhm.
I was like, I'll send a bottle, like, I was like, I don't mind like just pumping a bottle for you to have, but
Just in case,
he
yeah.
he did fine. He slept through the
Wow.
night. And he's I don't know if you know this like folk midwife kind of tale, but they say that the person you're most angry with during your pregnancy is who your baby turns out looking like.
Oh,
Um,
no. I've never heard
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's so that's one of those like old wives' tales kind of
Mhm.
thing, and he's just a little doppelganger of his dad. So kind of something we like laugh about now,
Yeah.
joke, but he's his mini through and through, just like his
Aw.
little twin. It's hilarious. Like
Aw.
honestly, like uh like us being separated and him not even really being part of his life, until he was
Mhm.
about a year old, how
Mhm.
alike they are.
Wow.
It's so funny. It's
Yeah.
just the little things. It's
Mhm.
but yeah, so it's been really cute. um and amazing kind of seeing their relationship blossom.
Mhm.
um yeah. And then yeah, so we were separated and, and I ended up getting my own place. I
Mhm.
got a job and moved out from my mom's, um my partner had helped me move it, right? I was like, hey, I'm getting my own place. Like, I would ask him, like, can you keep the kids so I can get moved in? Like,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. And he did help me move in and like help me get some shelves up and, that sort
Mhm.
of thing. And I moved closer to him, right? I was like, this will just be easier for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So because the commute for everybody was just a little too much.
Mhm.
With me living at my mom's. So I was like, let me move to a middle ground, right? I was like, I can't move all the way where you are, but I was like, I can find something closer, so it's a little
Mhm.
easier, you
Mhm.
know. Um, so yeah, we just ended up spending more time together. And yeah, and so I ended up, expecting again in 2022. And I was like, okay, you know, if we're gonna do this, I was like, I was like, there's a lot of things we got to do different, and he was on the same page with me, in that sense.
So, by when you say if we're gonna do this, do you mean coming back together as a
Yeah,
couple? Yeah.
right,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
um, yeah. So, so that that was a big part of this last pregnancy was just working through all of that and building, I guess, relaying that foundation of trust and that sort of thing. Um, yeah, and it's been really interesting and amazing, to to see us coming back together, and being able to support each other the way that we can. I think we are able to give each other a lot more grace these days. Um, yeah, and I think being young parents with small children is not for the birds. Like this shit is hard. And it will really test you as a person and as a couple and like it'll really test the bounds of your relationships. So It's not for the faint of heart. And I hope that's something I can pass on to my kids, like the the work of parenting, right? Like I hope that they can see that parenting is a job. It is work. It is something that you need to prepare yourself for, in a lot of
Absolutely.
different ways.
Hmm.
And I feel felt, I guess, jilted, like by my parents,
Hmm.
in some ways, right?
Yeah.
All that inner child work,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
like healing childhood wounds and shit.
Hmm.
Like having that reflected every day, right? Like at me with my own kids. So
Yeah.
like, oh shit, maybe I should like work on that. Um, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, hmm yeah, it's been a journey. And so I'm, really hoping that we can show our kids that, um, it does take a lot of work and this isn't
Hmm.
easy. And
Hmm.
I completely understand and support people who are like, I don't want to have kids.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
like I get it,
Really.
I get it.
Hmm.
So, I've just always known that it's for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, I'd say this last pregnancy was as uneventful as the rest of them. Gained a lot of pregnant weight, in the first trimester. I think my nausea was a little worse, and I'm not in the same shape as I was, right? Like 5 years ago when I first got pregnant. So it
Hmm.
has been a lot more physically challenging, like the pregnancy and the recovery even this time has
Right.
been a lot
Okay.
harder.
Hmm.
Um, but like outside of that, a pretty uncomplicated,
Hmm.
uneventful pregnancy.
Hmm.
Saw the OB to get the paperwork, and that's kind of it, just
Hmm.
that sort of stuff. And um, I remember I have a like work from home job now, so I
Okay.
was just like, I'll just like work until I give birth.
Yeah.
Um, but that was not the case. I ended up having a day where I woke up and was just like, like early labor, but I was just like, I don't know if I could keep doing this. So, I just like let my boss know. I was like, I'm gonna call it quits a
Hmm.
couple weeks early, right? So at that point, I was like 37 weeks along already.
Hmm.
And I think it was about like I don't know, like 10 or 11 days later I had a baby, but I wasn't on maternity leave for very long. But
Hmm.
before I gave birth, I was able to take a full 12 weeks.
Hmm.
So that was really nice,
Hmm.
before I came back. um yeah, and I remember just kind of being it was like prodromal labor, but not like I don't it was just very different. It was very
Hmm.
sporadic and just achy, and I feel like my body was just like trying to get him in the right position.
Okay.
Maybe, like
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It was just a very different kind of labor pattern
Okay.
than I was used to. But I remember just being really horny at the end.
Okay.
So, and I know a lot of people don't
Hmm.
like to talk about it, or they're like, why would you ever want sex when you're pregnant? But
Hmm.
during pregnancy, I feel definitely like the most sensual and like
Yeah.
sexual and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I've met other women who feel very similarly, right? If you've
Hmm.
heard of orgasmic birth or that sort,
Yeah.
I've never like had an orgasmic birth. Um, but I completely believe and understand, right? Like why that's even possible.
Yeah.
Like our vulvas are incredible. Are you kidding me? So yeah. But yeah, so I remember just wanting to be with him,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
those final days.
Hmm.
Um, and then um and then I remember waking up on the day I ended up giving birth and being like, oh, today's a little different. And it had been just like a couple of days of lovemaking, and I'm sure that's probably what got it started. So, um, yeah, and so I just kind of like was laboring throughout the day, just like putzing around. I think I like baked some stuff. I don't know. I was, just like random nesting things, putting away clothes and diapers and that sort of thing. And then I remember I laid down for a nap for a little bit. And then my partner was like, "Oh, what do you want to do for dinner?" Right? Like, what do you want me to make? So I told him what I wanted, and he was like, "Okay, if that's what you want, I'm gonna have to go to the store, right, for like these couple things." I was like, "Okay, cool." He was like, "I'm gonna take, Rhea with us." So he took our daughter with us. And the boys were with me, and I remember him leaving, and I was like, "I feel like getting in the shower." And so I got in the shower and just started laboring. Um, and I realized they're coming. Okay. And we had bought tripods for our phones because I really wanted to like record this one. I don't have any like footage at all of me laboring, or giving birth, from my previous experiences. So that was something I really wanted to do. I did a maternity photo shoot with this pregnancy, which I'd never done, so I have like these beautiful pictures of me with my belly,
Oh, that's nice.
and my kid, yeah, they're
Mhm.
gorgeous. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, our photographer was one of my partner's friends.
Okay.
And he was like, "Hey, she does, photography. Like, why don't you reach out to her?" And she was going to be our birth photographer, but she had a schedule conflict, and so it
Mhm.
ended up not working out. I was like, I was like, there's no way we can afford like anybody else who's willing to photograph a free birth
Mhm.
in the first place. So,
Yeah, totally.
um, yeah, so I was like, there's no way because I do know of it. There are photographers, but I was like, we just can't afford it.
Mhm.
So, I was like, we'll just record it, right?
Mhm.
So I was like, let me make sure I set that up. So I did that, set that up, started laboring, and it had been about an hour, and I was like, things are picking up over here, and he's not home yet. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I don't know, I felt like I really needed him
Mm.
here, like with me for this one.
Mm.
And so I was freaking out a little bit that he was going to the store like 2 blocks away, and I was like, why are you gone? Still, right? I was like, what the
Mhm.
heck's going on, right? And I tried calling him, and his phone had died.
Of course, yeah.
I was like, no. I was like, what's going on? Um, and so I had to just again, like really, like talk myself down from
Mhm.
it and being like, you've done this alone before. It's
Mhm.
okay. Like, and I know it's not okay, but it's okay. Like,
Mhm.
I was like, I know that's what you wanted, but like, just kind of having to accept that he might miss it,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And my boys had been running in and out of the bathroom, right? Like they were like trying to make me laugh and giggle because they could see, right? I'm like laboring and
Mhm.
uncomfortable. So they're
Mhm.
like trying to make me laugh and smile and stuff. And I was doing my best, right? Like in between the
Yeah.
contractions. It's really sweet. And I, have that on camera, thankfully, since I was recording. So that's like a really sweet
Aw.
memory.
Yeah.
Um, and then him finally walking in the door. I was like, where are you? He's like, I'm here, I'm here. So I'll take him back. Oh, he's hungry again.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, come here, buddy. Yeah, so he um got in the door and like got the groceries, and he was like, let me just get dinner started so I can feed the kids. He was like, I'll be right back.
Mhm.
So he just got dinner started, and I mean, our bathroom and our kitchen are just like this. So I could
Okay.
see him in the kitchen. He
Mhm.
could see me, right, like in the bathroom. I
Mhm.
think for my nervous system, that it
Yeah.
felt a lot safer, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I felt that I was finally able to get in that zone, and I felt myself start to transition, and
Mm.
labor really picked up, and they were just long, hard, like back to back contractions.
Mhm.
And I could feel my body starting to bear down, right, instead of just contractions.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, now we're getting down to business. Um, yeah, and so he got dinner started and did all of that, and then came over and was just holding my hand and holding space for me. Um, and I remember he brought me a bunch of pillows, and like a towel and stuff, and I laid down and fell asleep for like 10 or 15 minutes, um, let my body just get that last bit of rest in right before the final hurrah. So, um, yeah, so I have that on camera of me just fucking out. Me just knocked out because I like have a contraction and then you see me like lay down and, and then I slowly like and then I just like pass out like I'm gone. Um, and then a contraction wakes me up, right? About 15 minutes later. A contraction wakes me up and I get up and start laboring again. And I remember feeling my waters break. They burst and then I have a baby. I don't know. That's just how it works. So I remember feeling my water pop, and looking up at my partner and being like, I think my water just broke. Um, and yeah. And then I was like, okay. I was like, well, just um really being inward to do that work, to bring him here. And I remember my daughter really wanted a sister, right? Because she already has two brothers. She's like, that's too many. I don't need another one.
Yeah.
Um, her, those were her words. I'm not
Oh,
like,
that's so sweet.
I know. I was like, baby, I was like, I'll do my best. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I was like, I cannot promise you a sister. So
Yeah.
I was like, you can't be too upset, if it's a girl. So yeah, or if it's not a girl.
Hmm.
So it was a boy. I was a little disappointed as well, I must say. I was hoping I was like two and two would be so nice. Right. But like what like honestly, it has never really mattered. Um, so yeah, so I mean, I think my water broke and then it was like 10, 15 minutes later and there he was, and I remember being a little surprised seeing that he was a boy. Um, you okay? Oh, are you okay? Um, so, I was a little surprised, but I was just like, okay, you're here. And I had had a names picked out, and then this person that I follow on Instagram got a puppy and named their puppy what I wanted to name my baby. And the world ended in my head. I was just like, no, I was like, why would they take my baby's name and name their dog that? Like, I don't know. It was
Oh,
just one of those weird pregnancy like
yeah.
freakouts, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I was just miserable about it. I was like, I can't name my baby if they have a fucking dog that's like the same name. Like, what is that even, like, I don't know. I had a complete like meltdown about it. I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. Um, and so I still did feel a little conflicted about it. Like postpartum once I had him, but we've always taken a couple days to we wait until like they're about a month or 6 weeks old to even like register the birth. So I was like, we have time to pick out a name. So we did. We were able to finally settle on a name, and I was able to use that name as a middle name, and that brought me a little bit of peace and joy. So
Yeah. Oh, nice.
I was just like, I was like, it all worked out. I was like, the name
Hmm.
came to me for a reason.
Yeah,
So it
totally.
just wasn't what I thought it was for. I was like, okay,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
I just,
Aw.
yeah. So I just had to accept that. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was um a very, I don't know, like really straightforward, like he
Seems like
he
it.
came out and um I just like waited, he latched on and nursed for a little bit and I could feel my placenta detach and I had to help. I don't know, for all of them I've had to like manually just help it come
Hmm.
out. So
Okay.
you
That's
know,
totally normal. Yeah.
but right, yeah, like and um no problems. I noticed I had a lot more clots with this one. It was very different. The placenta was very different than any of my other experiences. That was very strange. Um, but I haven't consumed my placenta since my did I even do it with Soraya? I can't remember. I remember I did it with my first pregnancy, but I don't think I did it after that. And all three of my oldest children, their placentas are buried at the house where my oldest was born, right? There's a plumeria tree there that was the house that I grew up in.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
so we ended up we had to sell that home, unfortunately, but all of their placentas are there, buried under that tree. So
That's
that
so
they will
special.
always, that I'm not sure if you know, but in um, many indigenous and Polynesian cultures, right, burying the placenta is the best and standard practice, right, of returning this piece of you and your child to
Mm-hmm.
earth as a way to
Mm-hmm.
thank
Yeah.
everything, right, creator, the universe for
Yeah.
allowing you to bring this person, to
Mm-hmm.
this realm. So
Yeah.
um yeah, so it was very, we did like a ceremony and it was
Oh,
very special. And I'm grateful that that we were able to do that for them. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so it was a little heartbreaking that we couldn't do that, for him. And I just didn't feel called to keep this placenta. Like I said, it was funky looking. There were these huge clots. Um, I was like, I don't know. I was like, I feel like we can just say thanks and be rid of it. I was like, I don't know. There's something about this one that I don't want to keep. Unfortunately. Um,
So what did you do with it then?
so we just, I mean, once I had it out and we cut the cord. And we just like wrapped it up and I thanked it, and like I said like a prayer and that kind of thing, and then we just disposed of it. So yeah. Um, I was like that was all I felt called to do this time around. And everything else was pretty like straightforward, like he nurses like a champ. He pooping and peeing and being a normal baby and
Yeah.
he
And
just kind of slid right in. Yeah.
yeah. And with this babe then, were your other three children there and saw his emergence with your partner
No,
or
so they were like playing in the other room. Like they were there, right? Like we were all home. But no, they didn't like see it. But I do have it, right? Like I said, we were able to catch it on our phones, and record it. So they do like watching it. I've been working on some like compiling it, right? Like into a birth video, right? Like story. And it just hasn't happened yet. I had this like beautiful one set out and then it got deleted. I was like I had worked on it and
oh.
and then it just like disappeared and I was like, oh man, like it wasn't like completed or anything, but I had like
Hmm.
done
You're
like a
starting
big
it.
chunk. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so I
Oh.
just kind of lost a little motivation. I was like, I was like, let me take a step back and I'll come back to this. So
Hmm.
I still haven't gotten there. So this is kind of my first time really like really telling, this
Oh,
story.
cool. Wow. And how old is this
Yeah.
babe now then?
He just made 5 months this week.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. He was
Oh,
born last October.
congratulations.
Thank
Oh.
you. Yeah. So he's awesome. He's,
Mm,
he's wonderful. It's just a
mm,
great, perfect little baby.
mm.
He's way more talkative than all my other kids. I've never met a baby that's just like blah, 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 all the time. But but I'll take it. Yeah, he's great. Like I said, he fits right in. Like all of his older siblings are smitten with him, like we're absolutely in love. So, yeah, I mean, of course, it's been an adjustment in a lot of ways. The baby, for a little bit, he felt guilty. He was like, whoa, 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 that's my mom. So it took him a little adjusting, but he is the sweetest big brother. So, yeah, it's been a great experience, and I am forever grateful for my experiences, and my knowledge and being able and even knowing that I had this choice and had this option. Because I know a lot of people don't even know, right? Like I've literally met people who are like, you can home birth? Like people have been like,
Hmm.
that's not illegal. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why would it be illegal? Like what?
Mm.
Or
Yeah,
people
it's
still do that?
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like people have really interesting ideas. I don't know.
Yeah.
But really, I really didn't realize how ingrained and enmeshed it is in people. You have a baby, you go to the hospital. Like
Hmm.
there's no other option. And
Hmm.
I was like, it was very interesting in all of my pregnancies, right? Whenever I would disclose that to people when I felt like I could, right?
Hmm.
I learned very quickly to not just tell people that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but even people I would disclose that to, their reactions were always all over the place. I never, I
Yeah.
never really know what to expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't
Wow.
know. It was, yeah. So, but I do, try and talk about it when I can, sneak it in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, your
You
stories
know.
are so, so beautiful and they just,
Oh, thank you.
just seem so easeful and just you were pregnant and then you gave birth and
Yeah,
there's no big drama about it or big emergency about it. It's just, yeah, you're just doing what your body was doing, following your intuition, listening to your baby, being supported by your partner, and then you just have your babies one day in the daytime or in the
yeah,
evening, and it's
right. Yeah.
beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful. And I wish it for everybody, honestly. I'm
Mhm.
like, I wish everybody could have these experiences. And I wish
Absolutely.
that, even if they're not at home, I wish that everybody felt the way that I feel in my pregnancies and births, right? That they feel
Mhm.
respected and heard and,
Mhm.
and that their wishes are what they want, right? I think a lot of people think free birthers are like these extremists who are like everybody has to birth at home no matter what, and I'm like, what the fuck, that doesn't even make any sense. Like what? um I'm like, no. I'm like,
Yeah,
if you need medical care, then please get the medical care that you need. I don't
totally.
need that. So please stop like shaming me, right?
Yeah,
And like ostracizing me for making the best choice for me, right? I
exactly.
hope you're making the best choice for you as well,
Yeah,
right? Like I have
yeah,
nothing against somebody who has to, right, like get that kind of care. I don't know.
yeah,
Like if
yeah,
that's what you
totally.
need, then I hope you get what you need, no matter what. I
Exactly.
hope you and your baby, right, are getting the care that you deserve.
Exactly.
Um,
And that's the beauty
yeah,
of, free birth, birthing outside of the
yeah,
medical system. It doesn't mean that you've just shunned it completely and you're like,
yeah,
never going there no matter what. You
yeah,
have that option. And if you want to use it, go for it. But if you don't want to use it and you know you don't need it and you feel comfortable and safe at home to birth your baby, then you just do it and that's it.
yeah,
But the option for seeking assistance or care from other people is always there and it's valid, but it's just you're making that choice to say, I know it's there, but I just don't need it. And that's fine. That's totally
yeah.
fine.
Right? Like I feel like it's just another tool, right? Like in
Hmm.
the toolbox. Like if
Exactly.
yeah, if you need that tool, then go for it. I don't need that
Hmm.
tool. I need this tool, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah. Totally.
yeah. Yeah. So I feel like more and more as a society maybe and as a culture, especially from the pandemic and
Mm,
what happened, right? I think with hospitals and births and we saw a huge wave of
yeah.
free birth, right?
Yeah.
And home births start
Hmm.
happening. And so I'm hoping that that's changing the narrative, and then there's a
Hmm.
more nuanced look
Mhm.
at this conversation and what
Yeah.
is needed
Mhm.
in
Totally.
terms of maternity care and community care. Like
Mhm.
midwives are a vital part of filling this gap that we saw and are
Mhm.
still seeing, right, because
Mhm.
of the pandemic. Like
Mhm.
yeah, we can't all go to OBs all the time, and we don't all
Mhm.
need to go to OBs all the time. Why
Mhm.
don't we have a midwife on every block? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
why don't we have community, like community birth worker hubs, or like everybody knows a doula kind of thing, Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because I think that's the legacy we come from, right? Of granny midwives, of we were
Mhm.
just each other's keepers, right? It was
Mhm.
auntie down the road knows that stuff and
Mhm.
she'll be there, right? Like that's
Mhm.
just how it was.
Yeah.
Or and everybody had a basic knowledge as well, right? Like maybe she was the expert and she had seen some things and she had been
Mhm.
to X amount of births, right? So
Mhm.
she just had the wisdom and knowledge and experience kind
Yeah.
of as a matriarch, right? Or matron, but everybody still also had basic knowledge,
Yeah.
right? And knew how to respect and care for a pregnant woman, right? And a
Mhm.
postpartum woman. Like everybody
Mhm.
respected the postpartum period, right? And understood what that looked like for a
Mhm.
woman, kind
And
of
they
thing. There was no
respected,
expectation of her.
yeah, and they just respected women in general to trust their bodies. That's what we're lacking is
Yeah.
most medical midwives
Yeah.
and OBs, they just don't trust or
Mhm.
respect women to know what is
Period.
best for them. So it just really creates a
Yeah.
big obstacle. So yeah,
Yeah, right. And it's not just birth, it's definitely just
everything.
obstetrics in general, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of other things. Yeah,
Yeah.
like this postpartum, like I said, I practice fertility awareness method, and I've been interested in getting a diaphragm for a while as
Hmm.
part of my protocol, another
Yeah.
tool, right? Like in my
Hmm.
toolbox,
Hmm.
that I wanted to try out. And my OB was on vacation when I wanted to do my postpartum checkup. And so they were like, "Oh, but we have another OB in the clinic, who's available,
Hmm.
for the time you're looking for. Is that okay?" And
Hmm.
I figured why not, right? I was like, it's an OB at the same clinic. I've had seen different OBs at the clinic before, right? I just like preferred this one. She was on
Hmm.
vacation. Okay. Um, and this woman like refused to give me a diaphragm,
Oh my
and kept
gosh.
pushing an IUD on me.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
It was very bizarre. I was like,
Mm.
I told her, like, she was like, "Oh, well, what about an IUD?" And I have had an IUD previously, and I did not like it. My body did not like it. I know that's not a good choice for me, right? I was like, "No, I haven't had a good experience with it. Like, thanks, but no thanks." Um, and she was like, "Oh, well, are you sure? Like, you've had kids now, though, so maybe your cervix is like more common." I was like, "What? No, that's not how it works." Anyway, um, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So I was like, and thankfully now they have like these automated surveys and stuff, right? That go out after your appointments with doctors. Like a lot of clinics are starting this practice. So I was able to write her a scathing review, and be like, she didn't listen to me at all. She bulldozed me and bullied me about getting birth control that I was not interested at all. She didn't want to
Hmm.
listen to me about my body,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I was able to set up a follow-up appointment with like the OB that I normally see.
Yeah.
Um, and and I remember, telling her like, oh, like she was telling me that I would have to get like a fitting and this whole thing,
Mm.
to like get a diaphragm. And my OB looked at me and she was like, no. She was like,
Yeah.
she was like, there's like a general like pelvic exam that I need to do just to make sure that you don't have like XYZ, right? That would like
Yeah.
be a contraindication for a diaphragm. But she was like, I'm just gonna do that simple pelvic exam and write your script like right now and
Right.
you can go pick it up. Like, so I
Wow.
was,
Wow.
yeah, right? I was like, wow. And fun fact, I need everybody to know this. Walgreens does not prescribe diaphragms. They do not, will not.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what that's about, but just so you
Interesting.
know.
Okay.
Um, so
Wow.
yeah, and I found that out the hard way because normally that's where I pick up my prescriptions from is
Right.
Walgreens,
Okay.
right? So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, just send it over that way, right? And I got a
Yeah.
text that they had received it, and then when I went to check on it the next day, it was just gone. And when I
Oh.
called about it, nobody could, they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. They were like, we don't
Oh
have
my
anything in our
God.
system for you, like blah, blah, blah. Like they
Yeah.
just canceled it and like poofed
Just
it.
left it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
crazy.
was like, nobody was gonna tell me that you don't like I couldn't just get a courtesy phone call, like we don't carry that. You need to put your prescription in at a different pharmacy. That's it. Like
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
had to follow up and find that out. And if I hadn't, I don't
And you
know.
never
Like
would have got what you needed. Wow.
so yeah, so I called and my OB did let me know, she was like, some pharmacies are weird, just let
Mm,
me know. So I called
mm,
back her office immediately and they're like, we'll call around and we'll see what pharmacy you can get it
mhm.
from. So
Yeah.
thankfully
Okay.
I was able to get it and my insurance covered it. So I got
Okay.
that, free of charge. And
Okay.
um I really think that a lot of people would benefit from having this tool.
Totally. I think it's
It's
kind of
another great
weird
tool
that you need a
that they're not
prescription
more
to
accessible.
get
I
them.
right? I'm
It's
like,
like
I
you can
feel
get
like,
condoms just over, or condoms off the
hmm
shelf, so why don't they have
yeah. Why can't you
or
get diaphragms off the shelf?
yeah,
They're not. It's like a diva cup, essentially. It's
yeah,
literally the same thing. I like
yeah.
it's just shaped
Wow,
differently, but it's the same. It's the same type
pretty
of
much the
silicone,
same.
like
Mm,
body grade silicone and everything. And
right.
yeah, I have no complaints
Wow.
about it. It's been pretty great. And I think they are a very accessible, wonderful like reproductive health tool. Like
Mhm.
you said, should just be like in a bowl with condoms. Like
Yeah.
they just need to be available to people. Like even without spermicide, they are very effective.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm wondering, I'm like, how can we, like how can we make that happen? Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Totally. Yeah,
so
totally.
so I could go on. We could talk about reproductive health and wombs and all of that for ages and ages.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for sharing your stories. They were so beautiful and so lovely to hear. And, women need to hear it. They need to hear how birth can just be easy, how it can be intense, but it can just be beautiful and simple and an at home event that, you know,
Yeah.
not so
It
crazy
doesn't
and
have to be
hyped up.
scary. It's not an
Yeah.
emergency.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It really can just be a ordinary, extraordinary kind of thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And before we leave, would you like to leave like where women can find you?
Yeah, you can connect with me on Instagram. That's probably the best way to find me right now. I am Mama Mukwa. So yeah, find me on Instagram. I'd love to connect. I mean, I just had a baby, right? And we're in the middle of a lot of other things right now, but I do have big
Mhm.
plans for later in 2023 to start offering more in terms of support and education for fertility awareness and that sort of thing. Oh, hi. Is my time up? I think my time's up.
Okay.
Oh, all
Wonderful.
right. Hold on. Give me a minute.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Chalé. It was so beautiful to talk
Yeah.
to you.
Thank
And
you. It was so
yeah,
nice to meet you.
yeah, you as well. And we'll definitely keep in touch. And I'll put your
Yes.
information in the show notes so women can find you when you're ready to get
Yeah.
your fertility awareness stuff out to the
Wonderful.
world.
Thank you.
Thank you, sisters, so much for listening to this episode of the Free Birthing in Color podcast. If you'd like to work with me one on one in a primal activation session, donate to the podcast, or to have your story featured here or in the blog, go to primalwomanportal.com for all the information to do so. Did you want to connect with our guest speaker? You can find all her information linked within the show notes. And if you have time, please subscribe, write a review, and tell a friend to have a listen so that this podcast and these stories of women birthing in their total power can be shared far and wide. Don't forget to check out the show notes for information on the Earth Daughters Women's Festival, the Breach Without Borders workshop, and much more. New episodes drop every Thursday morning, so stay tuned for the next amazing story to be shared on any platform that you prefer to listen to your podcasts on, or watch these episodes on the Free Birthing in Color YouTube page. And remember, your voice and your story matters. So if you're a woman of color or an Indigenous woman who's had a wild pregnancy and or birth outside of the medical system, submit your story because it's so important that your voice is heard and celebrated in your radical journey of pregnancy, birth, and motherhood.